Hey, what's up, everybody? Hey, I'm starting a new playlist here that will be something a little bit different than what I normally do, and I'm going to be just talking about current events. And I troubled like a lot of folks about the state of our country. I'm one personally that has a lot of hope for the future, and I'm excited about that in many ways. But I think there's a lot of hard work that needs to be done, and just some things that have been on my mind for some time to share here on YouTube, and hopefully to encourage people in a couple of things. One, I think that any conversation going forward, to help solve the very legitimate and honest issues, the conversation has to be based in truth. And I'm concerned about that for our country, like I know a lot of people are. And we also have to, as we're seeking the truth and as we're having honest dialogue, there has to be some concern for doing the right thing. There's a lot of things going on in our country that are just flat wrong. But really, there's truth and there's right and wrong. And we really have to get back to those fundamental issues. A couple things that really got my mind stirred in this regard was seeing blatant displays of untruths, blatant displays of dishonest conversation. I remember watching a video of a Trump rally, I believe it was in St. Louis a little while back, and it wasn't President Trump himself, it was a Trump supporter rally out in the park, kind of a cool setup. They had a stage and speakers and pretty nice deal there. And BLM showed up, right? A local chapter and kind of someone leading that. And they weren't necessarily disrespectful. They showed up and kind of had their fists in the air and their banner. And the leader of the rally chose to give the leader of that BLM organization a few minutes to speak. I mean, really kind of unheard of. He said, hey, look, I know you're here because you don't necessarily agree with what we're talking about, but I want to hear your voice. I mean, super reconciliatory, right? Giving him opportunity to share with a group of people who were supporting the president. So the BLM guy got up on stage, shared a few nice things and appreciated that, shared, their goal for, for equality and such. And then he said this, he said, this is a nice gesture, but until things change, for example, he gave was George Floyd. He said, when someone can have a knee on their neck and be killed and nothing happens, there's not real change that's going to happen. And I thought, wait, time out. How can you possibly reasonably say nothing happened after the George Floyd incident? All the officers involved have been arrested. Cities have been burned. People are talking, people are listening. And this individual who's given an opportunity to speak at a rally supporting the president isn't even honest, right? Another thing that is interesting to me when they were chanting in Des Moines, right? They were marching in Des Moines, and one of the chants that they were saying was, hands up, don't shoot. Hands up, don't shoot. And of course, you're likely aware that's a reference to the Michael Brown situation in Ferguson a number of years ago when people got on TV and said he had his hands up and the officer basically executed him. And of course, after investigation and people being interviewed under the penalty of perjury, it turns out the people that went on TV and said that he had his hands up, admitted to lying, right? They, under penalty of perjury, they said actually he didn't have his hands up, and the evidence is overwhelming that he was charging the officer. He had in fact been in the car, reaching in the car to get the officer's gun, and the officer had no choice but to shoot him or else he would have been killed. That's the truth, and these folks, even today in 2020, are marching, chanting a chant based upon a lie. Not even getting close to being honest, to have an honest conversation about reconciliation and about healing that our country desperately needs. Antifa is an interesting conversation, right? Antifa, they created this name standing for anti-fascist, right? In fact, they say they want to do away with all fascists, but let me read to you part of the definition of fascism, which says severe economic, social regimentation, right? And forcible suppression of opposition. Forcible suppression of opposition. Who's doing that today? Antifa is one of the groups that you see many times, right? They're the ones pushing back from having conservatives speak on college campuses. Antifa is there. They resort to violence. They're forcibly suppressing the opposition. Antifa is a fascist organization, and they're claiming to be anti-fascist. They're lying. It's based on a falsehood. we can't have honest conversation, I think there's a legitimate question as to whether or not they actually want honest conversation and they actually want any sort of reconciliation. But they are pushing back against their own ideology, right? In fact, I understand that one of the tenets or one of the practices of Marxists is to blame others for what you do, right? But boy, if that's not in the headlines today, I don't know what is. But Antifa is doing that very same thing, not even an honest conversation. How can we have reconciliation and dialogue towards the much needed healing in our land if we're not being honest and we're not going about it the right way? Destroying other people's property, beating other people, forcibly suppressing opinions different than yours. That's not being honest. That's not honestly in search of the right thing. That is just wanting to get you away. And so that's part of the reason for this new playlist and these conversations I want to be having here, be normally around 10 minutes or less each, about truth and looking at some of the current events and trying to get to the bottom of that. You know, it's interesting, all the kind of conversation now about the Supreme Court. One side says we should move forward. One side said we shouldn't. Everybody knows that regardless, whoever was in power would move this forward. In fact, 29 times in the history of our nation has there been a Supreme Court opening in an election year. And 19 times it occurred when the presidency and the Senate were controlled by the same party. Of those, 17 of those 19 times, the individual is confirmed. So what the Republicans are doing right now, whether you agree or disagree, is absolutely well-rooted precedent in the history of our nation. So the other two, by the way, were still nominated during that time. So I mean, just absolutely what's going on is absolute precedent. And it's interesting to me that in the recent vice presidential debate, one of the candidates told this very touching story about Abraham Lincoln and how he, when he had this situation, his candidate didn't get nominated. What she failed to tell everybody, Honest Abe, while she's up there deceiving the country or trying to deceive the country, the only reason Abraham Lincoln wasn't able to put forth his is because the Senate was not even in session, right? And he put forth his candidate and it was confirmed the day after they returned. So even one of the vice presidential candidates on public television during the debate wasn't even honest. And so that's my encouragement for us is like, let's seek together, honestly seek together. And that means, both sides have to give, but honestly seek together for the truth and for what's right and what's wrong. There's good people and there's criminals, right? In doing criminal things in our nation right now. And that's not seeking the right thing. We need real and honest dialogue based in truth, based in a sincere desire to do the right thing, to bring healing to our nation. And one way I say this often is we need to have some mature adult conversation. Mature adult conversation. And not go try to break things or throw a tantrum when they don't get their way. But stay at the table, seek the truth, do it the right way, be honest, and bring healing to our great land based in truth. Absolutely, it is imperative, right, that we get back to the truth, that we get back to doing the right thing, and I look forward to having some more conversations about that. Thanks so much for jumping on, listening today. I encourage you to subscribe to the channel, the videos, make comments. I want to hear feedback from you, and this is an important thing to have an honest conversation. Thanks so much for listening. God bless you.